Good morning, everybody. My name is Roy Kessel. I am the founder of the Sports Philanthropy Network, and today we are very excited to have with us Amy Schiffman. I've known Amy for many, many years, and we've worked together in a variety of capacities, and we're excited to have her join us today. Before we get started, I just want to thank everybody for taking the time to come and join us, whether you're on here live right now or watching this later. On behalf of myself and Kayla Bradham, who is our VP of Community Development, and the whole Sports Philanthropy Network, we're glad that you're able to join us today, and we hope you get some terrific value out of this presentation. I know Amy was of all sizes, so I think that you're going to see some incredible statistics and value and everything from what Amy provides. I also encourage you to go and look at our website to see the other upcoming webinars, see what's there, and also take a look at the past sessions that we've held are all uploaded there, so you can watch those and get the handouts that were provided on those sessions. In addition, you can let us know what other types of sessions you're interested in seeing, so we can find speakers that will address the issues for our network. And then I encourage you to engage with us on all of our social media platforms. We're pretty easy to find on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and everywhere else. We're just getting our YouTube channel up and running, make sure we get enough likes so we can customize our channel name and make it easier to share. And we appreciate that you've all taken the time to be here today. So with that, I want to turn it over to Amy. As I said, Amy and I have known each other probably close to 30 years and have been working together in a variety of capacities. Amy's done a lot of work within the Jewish community and founded an organization called Giving Tree Associates about 11 years ago, I think, and has worked with, as I said, all organizations of all sizes, all different types of faiths, in various capacities, board development, fundraising, executive search, and really has a tremendous background in all of those areas. One of the strengths that Amy has is the ability to not only be an outside consultant, but she's worked in nonprofit organizations for many years, so she's seen it from the inside out, and it really has a terrific approach. So with that, I want to turn it over to Amy, and she'll share her, oh, actually, before we turn it over to Amy, let's have everybody just, we'll go around and have everyone introduce themselves and their organization so Amy can get a sense of
That'd be great.
what they're doing. We'll start with Kayla.
Hey guys, good morning. Kayla Bradham, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, VP of Community Development for the Sports Philanthropy Network. And by day, I am a high school language arts teacher.
Great. Doug?
My name's Doug Garner. I'm a director of adapted sports at University of Texas in Arlington and the men's head wheelchair basketball coach.
Cool.
Brandon?
I'm Brandon. I'm a student board member of Boys on the Right Track of leadership skills, wildlife skills, learning to run a 5K program.
Cool.
Vinay?
Yeah, hi, Vinay Mullick here. I work for Up Metrics. We help the social sector, nonprofits, and funders with impact analytics, fundraising tools, software, all sorts of neat things like that. So,
Great. Joseph? No? Okay, maybe he took a quick break. And if anybody else comes in, Amy, then I'll grab you at a break and let them introduce themselves so that they can share where they're coming from. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Amy and let her start her presentation.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for tuning in this world that is really very webinar based at this point. Sort of hard to figure out where do I go, where do I spend my time. So I appreciate you investing some time here, and I hope to make it really worthwhile. And I think the benefit of having a smaller group is that we can be very informal. And if I say something or gloss over something that is really sort of, well, okay, this is why I came on this webinar today, I want to hear more about this, you can just stop me, like literally just interrupt me. Or if I see a chat, I'll try and pay attention to the fact that the chat box is going off, the light is going off. But please feel free to just interrupt me. Again, it's hard to see everyone's faces once I start sharing my screen. And I really want this to be as useful to you and as practical as possible. So really, and I'm going to share my screen now. Can everybody see that? We still good? Great.
Yep.
So I want to cover a couple of different areas with you. And then, of course, anything else that you want to cover, we will cover. I will definitely leave time for questions both throughout and at the end. But I think we're at a very interesting time in thinking about nonprofits, thinking about fundraising in this environment. I've probably done 10 webinars at this point over the past 6 weeks where I'm talking about fundraising in a COVID-19 environment or economy. And when I first started doing these kinds of presentations and talking to people, I was really encouraging them to hold off on fundraising, to really focus on donor communications and donor stewardship. And I think we've come a long way in 7-8 weeks. And we're at the point where many, many nonprofits are not able to hold off forever. Many of us have fiscal years that are ending in a month or two, and others are right in the middle of their fiscal year. And we cannot, most of us have built fundraising in as a piece of our financial model where we can't balance our budget without it. And so if that's true for you and you need to figure out, okay, I can't wait forever. So how do we get back in the game here and approach fundraising in a really sensitive way in this environment? That's really what I want to talk to you about, is sort of stepping toward the challenge rather than stepping away from the challenge. Is how can we be doing the work that we need to do and fulfilling our mission and being as unapologetic as possible about that. So in that vein, I want to talk about donor communications. How are we communicating with our donors right now? I want to be thinking with you about rethinking your strategies and your case for support. So in other words, what were you going to do this spring, this summer, that you're now questioning, sort of scratching your head thinking, is that still a good idea? I was going to get this mailing out. I was going to do these e-blasts. I was going to be asking some major donors to support this new program that we're wanting to roll out in the fall. I was going to, I had an event planned. Should I still do that event? So let's think together about what's going to fly and maybe what isn't going to fly in the next 6 months or so. And then I want us to head toward really focusing our time and energy. We work with a lot of small to mid-sized nonprofits. And so whether you're at a large nonprofit with a lean development team or a small nonprofit with hardly a development team, right, with just board members or a few staff members, how do you make the most of the time you're spending on fundraising? What is the biggest bang for your development hour and your development dollar? Generally, that's about building or deepening relationships with our donors. So I want to talk about that and more specifically, your board's role in doing that. That's a lot to cover in a short amount of time. So I hope we'll also get to your questions very soon. Okay. Let's first focus on your donors and crisis communications. Many of you, and I'm guessing most of you, have already been in contact with your donors. So if I say we should be, I don't want to sound preachy. And if you haven't done it yet, you still have an opportunity to do the things I'm talking about. But I think, again, the entire conversation that I want us to have, or I want me to have at this point with you, is really centered around stepping toward, not away, not being afraid to communicate with your donors about sort of every aspect of your program. I say here, they care about how you respond to the crisis. So even if it means that you have canceled programs, you have canceled events, you are rethinking your strategy for the rest of the year, that's what donors need to know and hear right now. I think they need to hear that you have a plan, or that you're in plan development mode, rather than we have it all figured out. Nobody has it all figured out. I'll just say that. You know, the largest nonprofits in this country do not have it all figured out, are in the same place as you are in terms of, should we do this? Should we do that? Should we be soliciting? Can we offer program? Can we open this summer, this spring, this fall? Are we, you know, a necessary business that can open its doors? Every single nonprofit is struggling with whether or not it can deliver on its mission. And so I think what your donors, and maybe there's a difference between how we approach our entire donor base. So whether that's, you know, a couple hundred people, a couple dozen people, or several thousand people who are donors to your organization, there's a difference between what the donor base as a whole needs to know in the form of an e-blast or some mass communication where you're continuing to update them on the state of affairs and what your organization is doing to pivot to continue to serve people in need or your constituents. And there's that's sort of group one or bucket one. Bucket two is, what are you saying and doing and talking about with your major donors? And for every organization, a major donor looks different. For some organizations, that's a $500 gift. For some organizations, that's a $5,000 gift. And for a larger university system, that could be a $50,000 gift that qualifies as a major gift, or a $100,000 gift and above. Doesn't matter. The question on your mind is, how am I differentiating my communications? How am I personalizing and customizing the communications that I'm having with my larger donors, with my stakeholders, with board members, and again, people who are really significantly supporting this organization, versus how do I get the message out to everybody else who I don't really have time to communicate with one-on-one. That's really what you can be doing. And skipping ahead to what the board can be doing, engaging your leadership in these conversations and deciding together, what does our donor communication strategy look like right now? What is it that we're sharing with the world? What if we don't know the answers to all these questions? Can we be talking at least to our major donors or our major gift prospects about what it is we're struggling with? Maybe they have advice for us. You know, people always say, ask for advice and you get a gift, right? Ask for a gift, you get advice. So right now there's a lot of people thinking about asking for advice and pulling our donors in as close as possible so that they know that we're thinking about them. If you have not already made phone calls and Zoom calls to your top donors, and again, that could be the top 20 people on your list, it could be the top 10% of your donor base, whatever it is. If you don't have 30 people, let's say, or families that you are calling on an every other week basis just to touch base with them and update them. Now, I said I won't make you feel bad about anything you haven't done. If you haven't done that yet, now is the time to do that. Now is the time to just have that list on your desk next to you, maybe not even on your computer, but something that stares you in the face every time you sit down to do work, where you're constantly checking in with people. I am calling these wellness calls, right? The first check-in, unless you've been doing this all along, if you're starting Monday with these kinds of phone calls, then it's just about wellness. It's just to say, hi, I'm thinking about you. How are you? The organizations that I'm talking to, that I'm working with, and we, Giving Tree, have worked with over 200 nonprofits in the past 12 years. Those organizations that are having those wellness phone calls are coming back from those calls, those individuals, fundraisers, and by the way, non-fundraisers in the organization who are helping to make those phone calls, are almost shocked by how well they're going. That donors are really touched by being, by receiving that outreach in a non-solicitation kind of way, where it's just about, how are you doing? We're thinking about you. You know, and then my guess is they're going to ask how you're doing. And that opens up a conversation to you talking about the state of affairs with the organization. We're able to deliver on our programs. We're not able to deliver on our programs. We're making decisions about this. We really want, we're working hard to keep our staff in place. We received the PPP loan. We didn't receive the PPP loan. I mean, now is the time. Again, this is not for everybody, but this is for your key stakeholders. These kinds of conversations right now are critical. Any questions or comments about this before I move on? Okay. In case I have not, underscored the importance of this enough, we look back at what did we learn from the last time our economy sort of took a nosedive. And thankfully, we have data to support what happened and to understand what happened. And those organizations that really focused on relationship building, and again, that's just, that's a big, broad term. And what I mean by that is staying in touch with your donors. Staying in touch with your donors. By the way, not everybody wants to hear from you on a weekly basis or every other week. I get that. So understanding who prefers which method of communication is important. Is this someone who likes a phone call? Is this someone who's comfortable on Zoom? Is this someone who can just text or email to check in every now and then? It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. So relationship building with your top supporters, right? This is probably not the best time in nonprofit history to gain outside support. So first and foremost, I'm not saying you will not expand your donor base right now, but the first step is most certainly to go deeper with people who are already supporting you, even if it's with a smaller gift. Go deeper with the people who are already in your donor base. Those people may need all different kinds of outreach. None of them are bad or wrong. If the only way you can be in touch with someone is to text them just to check in, fantastic. It's better than not checking in with them. In fact, I have an organization that is a social service nonprofit who I was talking to yesterday. They had been trying to make these kinds of phone calls, but maybe not quickly enough. And one of their donors called them to say, you know what, I give you a very nice gift. You are the only organization that I make a major gift to who has not reached out to me and told me what's going on. And she called me to say that felt so terrible because he was right, So you don't want to be that organization. You don't want to be, if all of the other organizations, you have a lot of competition for dollars out there. So if the rest of that person's charities or philanthropic grantees are getting those outreach phone calls, or scheduling Zoom meetings with them, or emailing them to see how they are, and you're not, that's going to show up. And when those people or institutions have to make tough choices in the worst economy that person may have ever faced, and they have to make tough choices about who they're going to continue to support because their portfolio took a nosedive, right? They're not in the same financial position. And even if they can't, even if legitimately they're in an okay place to support you, emotionally, people are worried about their money right now, even if they're going to be okay. They're worried. Even the very wealthy, we're finding, are thinking about cutting gifts or keeping gifts flat. And so you don't want to be on that list. You don't want to be on the list. And the people who won't be on that list, the organizations that won't be on that list, or are less likely to be on that list, are the ones who've been in constant contact, who are the ones with whom people have relationships. It is very easy to cut you from the donor role if you're not someone I really know and I'm going to feel guilty or bad about. That's just the name of the game. So I also hope that, in case this sounds overwhelming, like, I don't know how I'm going to get all these phone calls made. I don't know how we have the bandwidth to reach out to all these people. What I'm finding is that many nonprofits, and I'm not sure if this is true for you, are utilizing program staff. So when in the past, those people would have nothing maybe to do with fundraising because the division of labor was clearer, maybe right now, if those people are not delivering program, they have the opportunity. And again, I'm hearing from nonprofits who say, well, I have these people on PPP, but there's not enough for them to do. And I say, I can think of lots of things for them to do. Your donors need that outreach. They need that one-on-one FaceTime, even if it's via screen time, with people on your team to understand what's going on. And who better to reach out to them than someone who works directly with your clients or your students or your athletes, right? Those are the people who are frontline, who actually have really interesting stories to tell. And so if you can deploy those people and not just, hey, here's a list of people to call. In fact, my husband is on a board of directors for a mid-sized nonprofit, and he got a whole list of people to call, which I said, that's fantastic that they're giving you stewardship calls. He said, yes, except tell me what to say. I don't know what to say. So they gave him the list without the script, which does not help. I think if you're going to deploy program people to make those stewardship phone calls, you really need to give them talking points and ensure that they feel comfortable having that conversation. I saw, Roy, if you're trying to talk to me, I think you're muted, but I saw a question or maybe something come in on chat.
So I wanted to jump in for a second
Yeah,
because I
please.
think Amy hit on a really important point, and that is when you look at the program staff, these are the people who have oftentimes the direct stories that
Yeah.
relate to what's going on in the organization. And sometimes the emotion from those stories is critical, and it's often very hard to transmit that emotion and energy that they feel from the work that they're doing to fundraising or development staff who might be a couple steps removed from actually interacting with the program recipients or with the athletes. And so, as Amy said, they need some training on the talking points and on the finer elements of the fundraising contact, but they probably have great stories. And I think you need to encourage them to use that voice because they haven't been involved in the fundraising process typically. And many of them probably aren't comfortable in that role. But as Amy said, if you're calling to update donors and give them information and share stories, that could be oftentimes even more impactful.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Roy. And I think that my experience with the program people who are actually reaching out to donors to say thank you, to share stories, and to update them on what's going on. I mean, it's not all good news right now. And I think your donors need to hear that. And we'll get to why, because we need to sort of reframe that case for support. But these program people are making these phone calls, are really enjoying having these conversations. It's a really sort of low risk way to introduce them to being a part of your fundraising team, because they're not asking for a gift. They're really just doing those check-in calls with donors, which I think is important. Again, you, just like your program team, it may be that your board has not engaged in a serious way in fundraising yet. And now is the time to ask your board members to get comfortable with these kinds of conversations. The more people you have who can make those calls, members of your team, board members, volunteers, the more people who are going to hear from your organization and feel updated and feel connected and invested in you getting back up and running. This is also a time to review your list because, again, I mentioned at the beginning, we can't not solicit. We can't refrain from soliciting forever. Most of us have to be asking for money just about now, even if we took like a month-long break from doing that to let everybody adjust to the shock of what's going on in the world. And so knowing which of your donors really likes a good crisis, really responds to a sense of urgency. I think back at the organizations that I worked at where I was an in-house development director, and I knew after a couple of years exactly who to call when we had a big problem to be solved. And that person liked to come in sort of, this people say, call me at the end when you only have, 10% less to raise, or you need a few gifts. Like someone likes to feel like they're saving the day. Fantastic. We need those people right now. And if you can figure out who those people are, review your list and say, who's going to support us during a challenging time or might feel really good about putting up a matching grant or a challenge gift right now. Yeah.
I have a question. I'm with a university. We're maybe a little bit different. I have to go through our development office.
Yes.
I really like the idea of the script. A lot of times I assume that they know because of everything we do, what we do, but they don't. So what would you recommend on a script? Like how many talking points or or what can I do to get a good script to our development office?
Yeah. I'm glad that you're acknowledging that they probably don't know, only because I've been in the development office and I can tell you for sure we're not as good about telling that story as you are. And I worked at a school for many years where I had to go to the teachers and say, I need the stories, I need the information, right? It's so different when you have those stories to share. And so two things. I would make sure that they have, so first of all, I wouldn't write out a full script. I think just talking points, because maybe because I'm a fundraiser, the second someone calls me and starts reading a script, I know it's a script and I really don't take them seriously. I feel like it's very transactional. So you purposely don't want to write anybody a script ever, because you want it to sound natural. But I think that they need first of all, some facts and figures. What is happening right now? What is not happening? Right? They just need to know, again, what decisions are yet to be made? What decisions have already been made about, again, students and student athletes? And how does that impact you and your program? I would not assume they know that. And then very, very importantly, you need to share a specific story or two about a student athlete, about a coach, about something that touches at the heartstrings, that is very personal and real, with a real first name on it, right? You don't have to tell anyone's private, but what your program has meant to that student or that family or whatever it is. So again, a couple facts and figures about what's happening, what's not happening, what that means for your program, and then zero in on a story or two. They need the stories because people care about real people, right? So how are the students reacting to this? Maybe you want to get a couple of your students on, recording video to just talk about how they're doing right now. Again, in the face of, 30 seconds, every student is better than we are, by the way, in capturing good video. That's what they do all day, every day. Trust me, I have teenagers. So to just even get a couple of 30-second clips that maybe the development office can put together and deliver to donors to say, this is what's happening, or to use in an appeal. This is why we need your support right now. These students are counting on us to be able to put this program back together and be able to offer it in the fall, in the spring, whatever it is. But I think that seeing, especially if you work with students or you work with young people, seeing their faces and hearing them tell the story, and there's give.org just put out a bunch of information about polling that they're doing. And they say that people are 30% more likely to read a message if there's video content embedded. So if you can get some short content out to them that then they can share with donors on your behalf, that's golden.
Okay. Yeah, I have 40 athletes with disabilities, so I've got 40 stories that are all great.
I don't want your development office telling any stories that don't have to do with those students, right? Putting out anything where they don't have photos, videos, testimonials from those students' families, right? All of that can go on video with a handheld phone and just emailed out to them to be shared in, again, one-on-one with donors or in some kind of an e-blast.
Thank you.
And I want to jump in for a second. I know Dion Thomas jumped on here from the University of Illinois, and Dion works in development down there as well. Dion, do you want to introduce yourself? And then I have a question for you about the same comments Doug was handling.
Sure. Dion Thomas. I'm the Associate Director of Development for the University of Illinois Athletics, and I'm based in our Chicago office. And I have to say, what the host just mentioned, not host, sorry, the guest speaker, is spot on with some of the things that we're doing now in our office. Our outreach has been, while subtle, because we are fundraisers, has been subtle, to what we call them wellness checks, or I call them wellness checks. And there was a lot of, not a lot, several of those people were always, hey, well, I need to make this payment or I'm going to do this, while being sensitive to our donors, we're still in the fundraising business. And we have utilized social media, which we're doing now, as well as great comment about the video. We haven't used our student athletes yet, but we have done some things based around our student athletes, but really we've just used our office with different captions, videos, short stories. And we've really started to utilize this platform as well, where we've been connecting our coaches with our donors. And, you know, we've done some, as they call them, wine tastings with some of our coaches that have really brought in. This has been with our major donors, but it has been great. And I'm sorry, you asked for an introduction and I just went on rambling. Go ahead.
That's good stuff,
Well,
Dan.
yeah, and I think you answered what I wanted to get to, was how you were using the athletes and the stories from the university's perspective, because I think oftentimes, as I see it on the other side, when I get all of the emails from every group that I'm affiliated with asking for money, that there's not a lot of difference in the way that many of them approach it. And yet the stories in the organizations are substantially different. And you don't feel, to me, you don't feel that connection, and you don't feel that same warmth when it's just a flat appeal from the organization without any of the graphics, video, statistics. And I know everybody's organization has incredible stories, and that's one of the things Amy's great at helping cultivate what those stories should be.
Thanks. Yeah, I think as much, I mean, we as donors, we want to really clearly understand gift impact. And that means seeing the student athletes, hearing from the student athletes, understanding how your program enriches their lives. So I think as much as we can get of that's again what touches us emotionally, and philanthropic giving is an emotional thing. So I think we want to hear from them, and especially because we need to continue to ask for support, we need to remind ourselves why it's so important that we keep giving to your program. And by the way, Deanne, I'm a U of I alum, so.
Hey, ILL.
INI. Okay.
NESS.
Yeah.
Yes.
I just want to talk for a minute about, and if any of you are really getting a lot of support from foundations, institutional funders, we can spend more time on this, but I want to touch on this. I've seen some nonprofits make some, what I would consider is a tactical error with institutional funders, AKA foundations, where we assume we're going to have to return dollars because we're not delivering exactly on our program. We didn't serve the number of student athletes we said we were going to. We didn't, deliver on the number of programs we were going to. We didn't. The funders that I'm talking to and the foundations who are writing op-ed pieces and doing webinars and sending out communications to their grantees are saying, we get it. We understand that this is not business as usual, and you may not be able to deliver on your promise to us if we funded one of your programs. We totally understand that. So I want to just encourage you to reach out to your program officer, again, on a one-on-one basis. Don't assume you're going to have to return dollars. Don't assume that they're going to drop you. I think the foundations in general, and there may be exceptions to the rule, have been really fantastic in terms of saying, what can we do to support you? A lot of them are not only delivering on their promise in terms of their grant dollars, but doing additional emergency relief support. So the organizations that are reaching out and sharing information, again, even if it's like, listen, we don't know what we're doing. I mean, being really honest, but using the foundation as a thought partner, are receiving those emergency grant funds. So again, it's just like an individual major donor. If you reach out and you develop a relationship and you create that dialogue, then they're going to, again, understand where you are and stick with you during tough times, and maybe even fund you at a higher level during tough times. So make sure that the foundations are hearing from you, whether it's corporate, family, whatever, on a really continuous basis. Any questions about that? Comments? Good. I want to talk just for a minute about the board member role, because I get a lot of questions about what should my board members or volunteers be doing at a time like this. I think the university system, given that, you know, you may have a larger, more removed board of directors, might be a little different in this way. But for any volunteers, and especially for those of you who have a board of directors where they're sort of trying to figure out what is my board's role right now, we never have needed our boards more in terms of serving as an ambassador for us. So most of us need to sort of rethink our case for support. If our case for support, especially in sports philanthropy, was all about delivering some type of program, and I don't mean, you know, special events, and I'll get to that in a minute. What I mean is delivering on your program. And if we can't do that this spring, this summer, this fall, we don't know when we can do that, then we really need to build a new case for support, right? What is it that the donor is supporting? Why should they wait this out with us? You may have people on your board, or you may have volunteers in the community who would be excellent in helping you to think that through. How do I rewrite that case? And I'm going to talk more about that in a minute. How else can we get those stories out? So what are we sharing on social media? Is that your development team? Are you doing that? Personally getting those stories out, and can they be reshared by a board of directors or volunteers? The more we can sort of seep into the consciousness of the donor community to understand what is it that we do, how are we pivoting and delivering on our mission in a different way, the more we can share that information, share those stories, get those videos out of our student athletes, the better. And that's a great role for a volunteer to play. The board is also legally responsible for the fiscal health of the organization. Again, a little bit different in a university system than it is with a smaller organization, but both are true, that generally the board is responsible for ensuring adequate funding to the organization. So for a smaller nonprofit, you may be thinking about how the board helps you in that budgeting process for next year, whether that's cutting expenses or drastically increasing fundraising dollars, and helping us to think, okay, if we have more need than ever before, if we offered scholarship support or scholarship assistance for sports related programs, and we anticipate needing that those requests are only going to increase given how many people are out of work and struggling, how are we going to attend to that need? How do we raise more money in this economy? By the way, that same study that I quoted before, give.org, polled 1,000 adults in the US the last week of March to ask about their giving. And a third of those adults said that they plan on giving, and you can look this up, and give.org has published their study, and it's interesting. A third of those adults said they plan to give more in 2020 than they did with their average gift over the past 3 years. More this year, not less. So if people are planning on giving more, the question is, how do we capture those dollars? How do we get our board or volunteers engaged, or more people from our program team involved with fundraising now in order to be out there asking? And last, maybe you need your board members or your volunteers helping you to rethink your strategic plan. Maybe you were right in the middle of a strategic plan. Maybe you are just about to develop your new strategic plan, but the board really owns strategic planning. And so if this is not business as usual for any of us, and rethinking our year, are there some great volunteers or board members who you can engage right now to say, we got to scrap what we had planned for this year. I need some help thinking about sort of a business plan or a strategic plan for how I'm going to move forward as an organization. That's the board's role. Any other questions about that? Comments?
Amy, one question that I have seen come up a few times is board members that in the midst of this crisis are struggling. What have you seen organizations doing, for lack of a better term, if board members want to leave or take a leave of absence from the board because they don't feel they're able to participate at the current time?
Yeah, I think that's a very real thing. And I think what I have said to people is you need for those of us who work directly with a board of directors, you need a powerhouse team on hand who is available to you. And for you to spend time and energy trying to reach out to people who are dealing with their own failing business or their own health issues in their family is not great. So if you have a board member who's looking to take a leave of absence, but maybe needs your permission to not feel guilty doing that, I would grant them that ability. Again, we need people who are engaged, who can step up the plate and do all those things that I just mentioned on the last slide. And for people who can't, it has to be okay for them to say, I can't do that right now. You'd rather know that than keep trying to schedule Zoom meetings or make decisions or budget meetings and have not enough people show up, or your quorum isn't there, or whatever. So I think give board members the opportunity to be honest about their availability and what they can do. Right. And not the greatest time to bring on new board members, kind of a scary time to come on as a board member, because like I said, for small, for most nonprofits, serving as a board member means taking on fiscal responsibility. And so you probably need to figure out who you've got on your team who can really step up to the plate and has the time and energy to commit and devote to the work you're doing right now.
Thanks.
If we're going to deploy our board members, or in some cases staff members, people who deliver program, if we're going to deploy them to make these calls, not only the wellness calls, but the continued check-in calls and stewardship and building that relationship and even getting to the ask, we have to arm them not only with those talking points that I just talked about, but it's fair to assume that some donors are going to ask some questions about your financial position. And so I wouldn't want to I think for initial wellness calls, you're okay with those talking points, but those initial talking points, anything beyond that, we really have to arm our team with information about where we sit financially, or give them permission to say, I don't know the answer to that question, but I'm going to get back to you. That's a great question, and let you know. Here's what I would want to make sure that anyone reaching out on behalf of my organization or my institution understood. These kinds of things. Do we have an endowment? Is the endowment helping us to get through this time? In other words, we talk a lot about endowment serving us for a rainy day. And right now it's pouring. We're in the middle of a storm. This is the rainy day that we've always been talking about. So is the endowment helping us to withstand this time? Yes or no? Are we able to tap into this? It's fair for a donor to ask these questions. How much an endowment is very different than reserves, cash reserves, which are more accessible than endowment. An endowment, after all, is supposed to be a pool of funds for which the principal is never touched, and we only use the interest on those so that the fund is there forever and ever. That's an endowment. Reserve might just be savings, cash savings put into a reserve fund. So what does the organization have available in terms of reserves to get it through a tough time? How much cash is on hand? Again, for a smaller organization, these are the kinds of questions that we're getting from donors. If you typically offer financial assistance to families, to students, whatever, what is it that you typically offer? What's that budget look like in a typical year? What do you anticipate confronting this year, right? What is it that you think you're going to need this coming year in order to be whole and serve students, families, athletes, participants in your programs? And if you've recently launched a major campaign, a major gifts campaign, it could be even an annual campaign where you've got someone who's paying a large pledge over the course of a number of months or years. Do you have the flexibility to offer them extended pledge payments? That would be something that you could do for donors to say, listen, instead of them canceling the gift, I would most certainly say, you know what, if someone you understand is undergoing financial hardship, if they may need to take longer to pay out that pledge, that's okay. Well, is that okay? I mean, I'm suggesting that it might be a tool you want to deploy, but only you know if the organization can wait for that gift. In most cases, I'd rather wait for the gift than cancel the gift in the system. So these are the kinds of conversations or pieces of information that you may want to have available to either you or the people who are making calls on behalf of your organization. Tough conversations. And then I just want to talk for a second about the the ask. You know, I have talked to many organizations who have said to me, and especially coming from the board of directors, this really feels like a bad time to be asking people. It feels very insensitive to ask people for money right now. How could we possibly put out, you know, something that is a direct solicitation right now? And I do encourage those board members to think really differently about asking. I think most nonprofits have no choice at this point but to continue asking. Many of them are continuing to deliver on their mission just in different ways. So maybe, you know, I just talked to a dance company the other day who said that they're doing all of their rehearsals and all of their classes online. So we have to get really creative, and they're a nonprofit, about how we're delivering on our program. So are you doing any kind of training remotely with your athletes? A lot of creative things going on. And if it's that you're continuing to be able to serve as a support system to your student athletes, to their families, to your program participants, and your work is continuing, and these people have already, your donors have already made a commitment to support you and believe in your cause and your mission, you should assume that they want your work to continue and that they understand that their support is necessary to do that. So I would approach these conversations with donors from a place of sensitivity and compassion and understanding, and say, we really, here are the challenges that we are facing. We would love for you to continue partnering with us and confronting those challenges and allowing our athletes to continue participating and building our program and making sure that it is ready when they come back. And that means not, you know, being able to keep our team, our professional team, employed at this point. If you can be our partner in delivering on that mission and making that happen, that's fantastic. And if you can't, we totally understand. So the people who can will, the people who can't won't, but we can't assume anything. That's the mistake. So we can't assume that it's obnoxious or insensitive to ask. There are so many people, again, remember that statistic that people, 30% of the people asked in this study of 1,000 adults said they're going to give more this year. So if we decide for them by not asking them that they are not participating, or that our cause is less important than, I've heard a lot of nonprofits say, well, I'm not frontline. I'm not helping the homeless with shelter. I'm not feeding people. I'm not a frontline healthcare worker. So I shouldn't be asking right now. I shouldn't be taking that portion of the philanthropic budget. That's not your decision. People give to what's important to them. Again, giving is an emotional thing. And if I believe in your cause, and I believe in your athletes, and I believe in your students, and I believe in your program, I might want to give more right now, not less, in order to make sure that it continues. But if we refrain from asking, we take away that option. So we can't assume that we're less important. And by the way, if we get out of line, right? If we say, oh, those other nonprofits are doing more important work than I am, so I'm not going to ask right now. If we lose our place in line in terms of people thinking about us with regard to their philanthropy, it's hard to get back in line 3 or 4 months from now, because you just told them your work is not that important, is not life-saving, is not critical, is not urgent, right? So I would not do that. I would continue to ask people in a sensitive way. And I think there's so many ways that we can do that, whether it's in writing through our e-communications, or, you know, I was going to say face-to-face, but Zoom to Zoom, to talk about what it is we need and why we need it. And we cannot be apologetic. It's their decision. If they cannot support you, they will say they can't. If they can, you have given them an option and an opportunity to fulfill their philanthropic goals. You're a great match for them because you do what they believe in. So we have to stop thinking, and we have to really limit our board members from saying this is not the right time to do that. It absolutely is the right time to do that if you need fundraising to balance your budget and stay in the game. Questions or comments about that? Okay. I want to just touch on events for a minute, because that keeps coming up with my clients is, you know, are we canceling? Are we postponing? Are we going virtual? It's a challenging time to make that decision. I always push organizations that I'm working with to sort of just measure that ROI, the return on investment. what is not easy is to put on a virtual event. It seems like, oh, we'll just slap up a web page and, you know, contract with Classy and use Zoom and we're done. The organizations that I am talking to, and I can give you lots of examples or websites to look at, who are putting up really good virtual events. And I don't mean a web page that accepts gifts, right? That's different than a virtual event. That's just online fundraising, another form of online fundraising. What I mean is something interactive with videos, with live asking, right? With leadership, with peer-to-peer fundraising. That's a virtual event. You generally need 2 platforms, by the way. Again, you need that live streaming interface because generally some portion of your event is live. And you also need your fundraising platform. So again, I mentioned a Classy or a GiveSmart, one of those organizations that allows peer-to-peer fundraising and can be updated in real time and connects directly to your website. So it almost looks like your website. Those are 2 different platforms that take time and energy and money to create. And in order to make that tick, in order to make that work, the organizations who are meeting their fundraising goals with virtual events have very, very strong peer-to-peer fundraising. Very, very strong. So you can look at Classy. You can look at, again, I'm happy to send you examples if you're considering this, where you've got all the names of the people who have virtual tables and are soliciting on behalf of the organization. They have goals. They have thermometers next to their names. They have their own. I mean, you've seen all of this in the sports world. There's a lot of this peer-to-peer fundraising. That's really what it takes to put up this kind of a virtual event. If you don't have the team, the volunteers, the board to step up to do that kind of work, really reach out to their friends, really reach out to family members and ask them. Most of that fundraising happens prior to the event. So a lot of the work that goes into putting up a virtual event is that those gifts are secured, major gifts, sponsorship gifts, going back to sponsors right now. That generally happens before the event. And then we may capture only 25% of our giving the actual night of or day of the event. So please don't assume this is like easy street and inexpensive and not time intensive. It is quite time intensive. And if you've got a large team to help you build that out, this might be the right answer for you rather than just canceling your event or moving it to who knows when. But here's the return on investment question. If you think you might be able to raise the same amount of money or close to the same amount of money by simply reaching out to your major donors one-on-one, face-to-face, talking to them like we just discussed about the state of the organization, what your plans are, what you need, and asking them for either the same support as last year or to increase their support in the form of an emergency relief type gift, you may be able to recover more money. You may end up better off in the end. Return on investment and speaking face-to-face with donors, one-on-one asks, building relationships with major donors may be a better option for you. That's what I want you to consider. If you don't think that's true, right? If you go down the list of donors and say, okay, these are the people who usually give big to my event. I think they're going to give big whether or not we have this event, and I'm just going to invest this time and energy into making calls to them and asking them to renew their support. If that's a no for you, if you do the math at the end of the day and you really need the event to bring in more people, and by the way, a lot of organizations are foregoing ticket sales and just opening up those events with a Zoom password. So you have to register and hoping that anyone who comes on without buying a ticket or without doing that, participating in peer-to-peer fundraising in advance, will make a gift that night or that day. Fine. If that's for you, fantastic. But again, you must build out that team of people who are willing to fundraise on behalf of the organization, or you may be disappointed with the results. And you also have to figure out which video pieces you're going to tape or your record in advance and what is important to live stream that day. Can you get some students? Again, I keep coming back to your program participants, your student athletes, your athletes. Can those people be available either via video in advance or live stream that day to really talk about the case, connect that case, and tell that story to your donors? It's so important that we are able to tell those stories via these events. For those of you who had, and I mentioned direct response, solicitation versus stewardship, for those of you who had appeals planned for this spring, again, 6 weeks ago, a month ago, we were telling you to hold off. I'm not saying hold off anymore. I think that you really do need to continue thinking about your direct response program and your appeals, but you have to revisit that story. You have to rewrite or recraft that story. And here's, again, where we can really work with different organizations or different, look at what different organizations are doing that feel compelling to you. I feel like I get 10 emails a day with this kind of thing, and I know what I like, and I don't know what doesn't speak to me. I also think you can reach out to board members or people in your network who are really good writers to help you recraft that story. So what is it that's going to change for you this year? What is not going to change for you this year? Is it that you need, again, more funding than ever because you're anticipating financial need will drastically increase this year? That's your new case for support that needs to be crafted and incorporated into any direct response or direct mail appeal that's going to be going out this spring. And I say stories before stats. If you can embed video, if you can embed a story into photos, into your direct response, now more than ever, that's important. Thoughts, questions, comments about this?
I think the question on events is really one of the biggest ones that I'm hearing, because the uncertainty right now is not only do I need to cancel and reschedule an event, but it's when can I reschedule it?
Yeah.
Because this whole fall season is still very much in doubt in the first place. And even if it isn't in doubt, then you're talking about a really, really crowded calendar, which is already crowded in the fall. And then now you have all of the spring and summer events that are trying to defer their events into the fall. What are you seeing in terms of organizations trying to decide between scheduling a fall event and basically just saying, you know what, we can't do it for 2020, we'll jump straight to 2021?
Yeah. Most of my clients who had May and June events initially pushed them, so with hotels, whatever it was, and by the way, I have returning money on here with a question mark. We don't suggest that you return registration dollars for events you've already planned without asking first if the donor will allow that to be transferred to a philanthropic donation, right, to be recategorized. So I had one nonprofit who just gave all the money, wrote an e-blast saying we're changing it, we're refunding all your money, without thinking first about whether or not they could ask people to keep those donations. So that's something to think about. And I know that, by the way, Bike the Drive just did that, where they said, if you tell us that you want your registration, because they canceled for May, if you tell us that you want your registration fee back, you can have it. Otherwise, we'll assume that you're allowing us to keep that and the money goes directly to charity. So just something to think about. The organizations that had May, June, July events and many of them push them into September, October, November, December. Now I'm seeing that the November events, large events, are being canceled and going virtual. That people are really afraid to do anything truly before there's a vaccine out. That they don't believe that these large scale events are going to happen, and that you know, at least in Illinois, Governor Pritzker is not allowing them to happen anytime soon. And so that may be the reason why I would just make a plan to go virtual now. Only you know if you can forego that revenue for this fiscal year. You know, I would say that my first question to my team would be, can we achieve that revenue a different way? Can we make phone calls to people and ask them to continue supporting us or schedule Zoom calls? That would be my first instinct. If that, you know, if your event raises hundreds of thousands of dollars and there's really no other way to capture it without that event, you might want to go virtual. But I think planning large scale events for the fall is going to be a disappointment for you at some point, because I think most organizations are finding it's too risky.
Yeah, I think that's the big challenge right now, is trying to figure out when to schedule those events. I mean, you talk about the vaccine being the turning point. the reality is even things in the first quarter of 2021, or maybe even the second quarter of 2021, from the timetable of the vaccine, it's a concern as to whether that will even be available for large group gatherings.
That's right. That's right. I see we're running short on time. I just wanted to put out there for you, if anyone on the phone wants to sort of do a deeper dive on their own challenge, we're offering complimentary 30-minute coaching sessions. You can email me or call me. I'm happy to talk about your fundraising challenge individually. Happy to do that and continue to take questions.
Great. Well, Amy, thank you so much for joining us today. I know that we're officially out of time, but Amy will stick around if you have any other questions here. Thank you again from the Sports Philanthropy Network on behalf of Kayla Bradham, on my behalf, and everybody that's involved. We appreciate you taking the time to be here, and we look forward to seeing you on some of our next webinars. Thank you.